Off-roading to the Knik Glacier is simply an amazing Alaskan trek. Under good conditions, it can be easily done with a stock four-wheel drive. For future videos, I'll avoid naming other trails, but just about everybody already knows about Knik. Stay tuned to the end where I'll go through the current trouble spots as of January 2024. Tip number 1. Don't go alone and go with somebody who knows the area if you're able. Going alone is pretty obvious, and if you go with somebody who knows the area, it will be a lot easier to avoid the potential problem areas and not get lost on the trails. Tip number 2. Know the season, time of year, and pay attention to recent weather. The conditions on the Knik trails can be easily affected by weather. When it's single digits cold, usually January, February to mid-March, the trails are usually pretty good with thick ice. As far as snowfall goes, pay attention to recent and upcoming snowfall and wind that creates snowdrifts. Tip number 3. Have recovery gear. Since I'm aiming this video more towards beginners, I would recommend starting off with something simple like a kinetic rope and 2 soft shackles. If you're in the Anchorage and Mat-Su area, I would recommend hitting up Total Truck on Dowling and Anchorage. They can get you what you need and can show you how to use it. Since we're talking about recoveries, this one's pretty simple. Tip number 4, know where your recovery points are and make sure that they're actually recovery points. You don't want to hook up any recovery gear to something that is not a tow point. Tip 5, have a GMRS radio. This is good advice in general, but Knik is such a popular trail and at times can be within transmitting signal to Palmer depending on your radio. Worst comes to worst, if you don't have cell signal, you can always try channel 20 or any of the other popular channels to see if you can get some help. Tip number 6, and I cannot stress this one enough guys, air down your tires and make sure you have an air compressor to fill back up. Airing down your tires is normal off-roading advice, however at Knik there's so much snow and ice, airing down your tires will be that much more important. What you air them down to is going to depend on your setup and probably your preference as well, so I'll leave that up to you. Tip number 7. Start up Onyx or Gaia and track your route. I say this especially for Knik because you may accidentally go down a narrow trail that scratches your paint and there might have been another way. With Onyx or Gaia, you can mark where that was and you can avoid it next time. With any off-roading, scratching is likely, but it's nice to avoid it if you can. On to our on-trail tips. Tip number 8. Pay attention while you're driving, guys. This is a really easy trail, which means it's easy to get complacent. Wildlife crosses the trail regularly, there's icy spots where you can slide into trees, and there's whoops that can toss you if you don't have a fancy suspension. So just be careful while you're driving out there, be careful if you're driving at night, make sure that you're going slow enough to where you can see what's in front of you. Tip number 9. Keep adequate vehicle spacing, especially up or down hills, and make sure you communicate with your group when you get to hills. Wait for the vehicle in front of you to go all the way up or all the way down a hill before you go. If you're going up the hill by the frozen lake, have a spotter on the lake hill or check your comms and just make sure that the upper area is clear before you send it up the hill. Last tip, tip number 10, use your gears to your advantage, as well as low and high range. This is more aimed towards people with automatic transmissions since people with manual transmissions are usually pretty familiar with this. For example, I like to go down the steep hill onto the lake in second gear low. This uses the engine to slow down, which can help avoid sliding because I don't have to jam on my brake pedal as much. Now onto the spots where I see new people having trouble as of January 2024. This one is called the Hole in the Woods. Here's my friend Gabe going through it with a 2nd gen Sequoia, open diffs, and on 35-inch tires. Here's me experimenting with my Max Tracks, and they broke. So I would recommend just dropping in, put your front tires on the ledge climbing out, and leave some space between the ledge and your rear tires and just bump the gas and get it up like this. The second spot that I see being a trouble area for new people would be the hill going down onto the lake, should you decide to go down onto the lake. If you're going to go down onto the lake, just keep it in a lower gear, 1st or 2nd gear, and make sure you put it in low range, and just go slowly and try not to go sideways. Going back up the hill, you're probably going to need to give it a little bit more gas. Here's an example of me failing. I'm in 2nd gear high, I didn't give it enough gas going up the hill, and so I slid down backwards. I just kept my rear end straight and slid back down safely. Here's an example of me successfully getting up the hill, barely. I gave it a little bit more gas, I was in 2nd gear high still, and I chose a different line that had a little bit more traction. It was a little bit sketchier of a line, I preferred to go just straight up the normal way, but it was pretty slippery that day, so I went this way and I was able to get up. Alright, the last one is a crossing that's currently frozen, but it's worth noting because in past years it hasn't been frozen. So here's the same spot last year, and as you can see, it is not frozen. So it's a good spot to point out because it shows how much things change year by year. Last year it was a trouble spot. People were getting their bumpers hung up. They were knocking out tail lights. But this year, since it's frozen completely, it hasn't been a problem at all. That wraps it up for my 10 beginner tips for Knik Glacier. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more.